It's fun.
What's up? Welcome to the Brain Gangster Podcast. I'm your host, meditation and wellness expert, Stacey Turis, along with my host, Carrie Tredway, the Mindful Money Maestro. What up, Carrie?
What up, everybody? Happy day, right?
Happy day.
On today's episode, 10 ways that we sabotage happiness. So we're going to be talking about the elusive happiness and ways we can achieve that for sure.
And we're also, this is really special because this is our first guest.
Yay!
We are joined today by Daniel Harman, who is a self-made entrepreneur who has lived many places all over the world looking for the H word. So we're going to talk to him and see if he found the elusive happiness. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you, Stacey. Thanks, Carrie.
Welcome, Daniel.
We're so excited to have you.
Hey.
It's good to be here. I didn't realize I was going to be a first guest. Now I feel the pressure a little.
Yeah,
Well, we're still scared too. Don't worry.
yeah, it's super we're full of pressure.
Yeah.
So I just want to give a little background. The way I met Daniel is obviously I do meditation training, and Daniel was lucky enough to book one of my mind body beach experiences, and we obviously got to know each other really well, and I completely vibed with him because I felt sort of like this like he was sort of like a kindred spirit in where he was in his life and everything he's been through. So Daniel has a really incredible story. The reason I wanted to talk to him about finding this elusive happiness and ways that we sabotage it is because, as I said, he's a self-made entrepreneur. He's made his money, which we all sort of like, that's a lot of our goals. That's what we think, gosh, if we can just make that $1 million, we'll be happy. So Daniel's here to set the record straight and let us know what happiness sort of really means, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I've found the destination of happiness, and I'm going to show you guys what that is. But
yes. Okay, good. Okay, so Daniel, can you just give us sort of a little bit of your background on how you got to the point where you are today?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of like a corporate guy come entrepreneur. It's kind of a summary of the story. Yeah, look, I mean, depending how far back we go, but I wasn't very good at school. I wasn't a school person at all. I was really good at like flunking school and going surfing and things like that. But I went to university and did what everyone said to do. Yeah, so I went to university. I went to school in England. I actually had a gap year in between high school and university, and I was traveling around Europe and just literally chose a destination and went to the university and knocked on their door and said, "Can I apply?" And turns out you can actually do that. I don't think you can do that these days. I don't know how schools would take it these days.
Who knew?
Yeah, that's right. And I had terrible grades, so I had like all of these exams to sit. But they turned out they liked me, so they let me in. And for a while, I was thinking, not dissimilar to what's happened recently. I'm like, is this real? Is this actually happening? So yeah, I went to school, but I did economics because my father told me it was a very good degree to do. I have never used economics since, but it was a good degree. And yeah, like I did school. I did really well at school. I did honors and left and just kind of followed that expected path. Like I went into venture capital, having a finance economics background. Worked for Merrill Lynch. I remember they gave you like £1,000 like a budget to buy a suit on your very first day, and I thought I'd made it. I was kind of the gang.
That was it. You were ready to rock.
I mean, excuse my language, but I fucking hated the job within about 2 months. It literally was probably 2 months that I started to hate it, and I was dreaming and sleeping spreadsheets, and I realized pretty quickly that whilst I was good at numbers and motivated with that sort of like 3-year goal of getting a degree or 4-year goal of getting a degree, working in the corporate world was not for me. And I was living in London in the 90s at the time, and I was more interested in going out than working, is the honest truth.
Absolutely.
And there's only so long you can kind of have that masquerade. Yeah, eventually you get pulled up in one way, shape, or the other. And it was me. I failed this. I just did this investment bar exam thing, and actually I caught up with my old boss relatively recently, my boss Tim. I think I failed it 3 times in a row, and that was actually me trying a little bit as well. The first 2 times I wasn't trying, but yeah, the last time I really did try, I failed, and I sort of took that as a sign, and so did my employer, and they let me go, and I kind of like landed in this space of huge relief that I wasn't working there anymore, but then also,
what the hell am I going to do now?
Yeah, and I wish I'd saved some money for this kind of situation. But then it was really good, that was the catalyst for me to kind of think about, I think I must have been like, I was a little older at university. I think I finished university at 25, and then so I was in my mid-20s, and after Merrill Lynch, I kind of like just sort of started to think about what am I going to do. I went back home to Australia, and then sort of delayed that thinking process for a little bit, but then was super lucky. I was true story. I was on a train, actually. I was visiting a friend in Brisbane, and I was on a train, and I was just chatting to a guy next to me, and he happened to be one senior guy at this new startup that was a travel-related startup. And I love to travel, and I didn't really have that background, but because through the venture capital world, I'd been to the Bay Area a bunch of times, so I knew how it worked, essentially, raising money anyway. And that conversation led to me getting a job at a company called whatif.com. It's
So the conversation on the train did?
Yeah. And it's actually the second time. It's happened 2 more times afterwards, actually. I talk to anybody, yeah. I mean, these days I talk to dogs more than I do people sometimes on the street, but yeah.
You're like, little puppy!
Exactly right. And then you kind of like feel like, oh, maybe I should ask who the person. Often I don't even ask the name of the person that's holding the dog. But yeah, so I was lucky. I was just very lucky, Like I was kind of like unskilled professionally, other than having an economics degree, and I joined a startup that was kind of like based around tech and design in the travel industry. And during that, I went back to school actually and did a master's in creative industries like design. And then that sort of like started everything.
So when you're saying design, is that graphic design?
At the time it was, yeah, because there wasn't so much digital design going around. Right.
But did you vibe more with that?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think I vibe more with creative people, full stop. I think that was kind of the thing. And it was such a refreshing look at life, because I was working with very kind of like type A, number crunching kind of like people, and
totally the opposite, right?
Totally the opposite, and everything that the creative people just the feeling I had about being around creatives. Now, I personally don't count myself as a creative necessarily, but I definitely vibe with those people better. I still do today, Like I find it hard to have a conversation with.
I find it really interesting that you don't consider yourself a creative, because when I met you, I instantly thought you were a creative.
Yeah, I think it's it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's all related to what we're going to talk about today. But like, I think when I think of creatives, I've just worked with some amazingly artistic, creative people that I just don't put myself in the same section as guys,
But do you think that's because, do you think that's just because you're not giving yourself credit, or do you feel like they're just sort of a level beyond?
I think I'm very broad with my skill sets in the creative space. I don't go deep on a lot of things, and the people I really admire.
It's like the title thing that we were talking about. You don't want to be boxed into a certain thing.
No, not at all. No, and I don't actually. I mean, it's funny actually. Years later in one startup, we had this conversation. I realized actually very quickly that titles are super important to some people.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and
the identity is placed with some people.
Yeah, and I'd have these conversations with people in my team, and that was like down to kind of like, I mean, they were young, they were like getting upset about the title that we'd given them. And, from my side, I'm like, you can call yourself whatever you like to call yourself. It doesn't bother me. I don't think you can call yourself founder possibly, but anything else, it doesn't bother me.
Right. You're like, that is not where I'm going to gain like the respect or the help I built from this.
Exactly. And that, a segue of that is like, my dad actually instilled in me that, when you get that promotion, you shouldn't be asking for the promotion. If you're asking for a promotion, you're not probably good enough for the promotion.
Right.
It's a little bit like the titles, yeah. Like, you'll get called VP if that's what you aspire to be, if you do a really good job. Don't keep asking for it. Anyway, that's a segue. So yeah, I was very fortunate. I had one startup that did quite well, and that was like the snowball effect. You're kind of forced to save a little bit of money. I was still enjoying myself. I was still spending a bunch of money, etc. But I had a little bit of money to be able to go do little side projects. I did a bunch of little side projects, sold one of those. That added to this little pool. The snowball got a little bit bigger. And like we were saying, Carrie, like it gives you confidence that you could do it. And I think having that confidence is the thing that kind of like just helped that snowball sort of grow a little bit. I definitely had my losses, like I've definitely had complete stuff ups. I think everybody does, but I think when you're dealing with smaller amounts of money, they don't really hurt so much, I guess, in some ways. And yeah, I went from one startup to the other. So I was really lucky. I worked at kind of like the 3 big startups in Australia that are still around today. I worked for a company called Seek, which was back in the day, so it's old school now, but back in the day where it was classified adverts online, it was kind of like a Craigslist sort of, but for jobs.
Nice.
Super sexy job. Yeah, but that was, again, I learned a bunch, and they IPO'd, and then I worked for another company called iSelect that was comparison sort of, again, super sexy, comparison of financial products actually, which was, I guess, yearning back to some of the work I'd done before. But then long story short, I got the opportunity to go to the States. I moved to the States 2014, joined a company that was a big company. It was an Aussie company that took me to San Francisco. That didn't work out very well. I knew the founders. The founders, super cool guy. We had a very honest conversation about, I sort of said, well, if you're not going to listen to any of the recommendations I make, you're just completely wasting your money. And he said, yeah, I am. So we parted ways on that conversation. And then that again was a trigger. I was lucky. Through VC World, I'd known a founder of this company called Whistle, Steve. He was looking for someone. They had a very small team, and I joined Whistle, and then that was sort of like my San Francisco experience for 3 years.
So then with that company, that sort of set you on a path to freedom financially, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like it was certainly, it was like, I feel very fortunate in the sense that I joined a startup in San Francisco. We had some initial sort of little wins, but we weren't really making any money. And then we found a product that really resonated. And I was part of that team that did that. And then we got acquired. And then, if you're early on, the founders certainly made life-changing money. Everybody else made, certainly enough money to kind of take the pressure off anything around financial stuff. And I was lucky to be one of those, so I left. Interestingly, the visa that I had at the time, because the company was acquired, then I technically didn't have a job anymore. So then I had to get out of the country very quickly. But I went to France and spent a year in France sort of working out what I was going to do. And then, but again, that little snowball obviously got bigger. And then I had the comfort level, I guess. But this leads into some of the things we're going to talk about, because it was sort of like, okay, I've reached the destination. I've reached it. What do I do? And I had this idyllic idea of buying a house in France and living this romantic life. And, it turns out it's pretty boring. That's the summary of it.
It's really boring to live in a farmhouse in France.
That's exactly right. Yeah. There's
drink rosé all day.
Yeah. There's only so much rosé you can drink. And believe me, I tried that. There is definitely a limit. But yeah, I laugh at it, but in hindsight, it was a pretty dark period, but definitely for me. Like, it was tough. I feel guilty saying that. I feel kind of like, in some way, I'm saying that I felt that I don't deserve to say that, because I guess in many ways I'd reached this destination of comfort in some way.
Right. And what we think happiness and success is, right? So then when you reach that destination and you find that that's not the source of happiness, it's like, well, what the fuck is going to make me happy? Yeah,
that's right. And it's a, like any change or anything that's a little bit unfamiliar, it can be kind of challenging and scary at the same time. And I did the very opposite of what I should have done. I started drinking quite heavily again, and I just sort of like living, not a rock star life by any means. I was living in some little country village, but I certainly went down this hole that definitely had a destination of a place I don't want to be. And And then, I had a really close friend of mine, Scotty, who's sort of my guru. He came over and said, look, I used to party with him. That's our relationship was always partying. And then he sort of came over and said, look, you deserve everything you have. You need to get out of this hole and get back on track. And actually accept that working and building businesses is actually a really big part of who you are. And don't deny yourself of that. Don't feel guilty about that. Don't, because I think I was struggling with this idea of, is that all I am? Is that my existence? Like,
right. Is that my purpose is just to build things and then, right.
Yeah. And again, the build, and it's interesting, like the joy of building something. Yes, it's sweetened if it's commercially successful, but that's only a tiny piece of the fun. So
right. That's that's the end of it, really.
Completely, yeah. And like all during the years that I had worked on projects, I'd had little sweeteners at the end, but nothing really that would change anything. And I was probably happier during those periods than I sort of found myself at the end of 2016, early 2017. And then, so I just worked through that. So I was in France for a year, and then I started another company. It was sort of like we're an agency that helps startups build their first product. Launched that, worked on all that last year, moved back to the States, decided to move to LA rather than go back to San Francisco. I think I love that city, but the irony being that when you work and live in that city, you never get to see the city because you're always working.
Yeah, like their MO is work.
Yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic. It's interesting to talk about that. The whole theory around we all know that the science suggests that working 80-hour weeks is not healthy for you. It doesn't, you get better business results if you don't. Yet we have very few success stories of companies taking the direction of working less hours. So in San Francisco, my experience certainly was that it's celebrated. Like people used to boast about how many weekends they worked.
It's actually a status symbol.
Completely.
For working your ass off and putting in so many hours, and it's so crazy because they are not understanding the balance that it takes to maintain true happiness. Like, we can all work our ass. All of us can work 24 hours a day if we want to, and we can achieve that if we put our mind to it. Some of us can achieve what you've achieved and make the money and everything else. But in the meantime, as we're going through this journey, it's like, where's the balance? What is going to make me happy? First of all, in the journey to happiness, what we perceive as happiness, which is, being part of a startup that is acquired by someone else, that gets sold, etc. So so I want to talk about just sort of these barriers that you've mentioned, actually a few of them, these barriers that we impose on ourselves for happiness, because I think a lot of times people blame external circumstances, other people, for them not achieving happiness. And I think we would all be surprised at how much those barriers come from inside of us.
Completely. Yeah, I would say the vast majority do. But I say that from the point of view of, so I went through the whole gamut of the reasons why I wasn't happy. I love my therapist. She's awesome. And we would talk a lot. And we would talk about this idea of, I didn't have one thing I really was frustrated with in many ways, and it sounds weird to say, but I had a great childhood. I didn't have anything in my childhood that would indicate for me to suffer from mild depression or anything like that. In some ways, I was hoping I did have some indication, because it would kind of
just something, a reason for it.
That's right. But it turns out my parents were awesome, and which is great.
You're like, my childhood was great. I live in a farmhouse in France, drinking rosé all day. My life sucks. Oh my God.
Right. What the fuck is wrong with me? It must be something in me that's wrong.
I know. And I had those moments, like I bought some silly little car, like some sports car, and I had these moments of driving through.
You bought the sports car?
I did all the cliche. Yeah. I did all the cliche.
I got a raised truck with big wheels. Did you do that?
Wait, I need to know what kind of car was it?
Yeah. Sorry?
What kind of car was it?
Porsche 911. Yep.
I love it.
I feel way better about that than a Corvette.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
So no, I mean, but you know, you have these moments of it's interesting. You almost have like these little reflections or little snapshots of, oh, so you've made it, you know, like this is it. And then, but they're only tiny little, they're like lightning bolts. They're little tiny little things that it's not sustainable, not fulfilling at all.
No.
And maybe it just strokes your ego a little bit, maybe, but otherwise I just found that I was actually I was much more happier when I was doing 80-hour weeks in some ways. So that was the conscious decision to move to LA and try to find balance a little bit better. I do find Southern California has a bit, because the scene is completely different here. It's obviously more about the entertainment industry.
For sure. Yeah. That's a reason I love living here. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely a balance here from the work aspect, but then I'm still obviously going through this journey of working out what next, you know, and you know, I go through like a lot of people do, I think, I go through frustrating periods of why haven't I thought of the next idea? Why haven't I got this new project?
Yeah, because you need something to grab onto. There is nothing for you to grab onto at this point. So I totally vibe with how you feel, because I feel like I work the same way.
Yeah.
And you can ask Carrie. She's known me for 20 years. When I'm at the end of a project, I go into a depression because I don't know what is going to grab me next. And it feels like you're always going to be in that space.
Yeah. There's no plan after that. So it's like flailing for the next steps, no plan, no routine. What do I do? Where am I at?
Exactly. And you're not taught how to, because if you go from project to project to project, you've never really learned what to do in those flailing moments. You don't really kind of like, you just sort of like, I mean, I feel privileged that I can pause at least. I don't have to go back into the robotic way of getting a corporate job and continuing on. But it's no less frustrating. It's just the space.
Right. It's probably more frustrating because it's like you should be happy, but you're not. So what's next?
Yeah, that's right. And it's actually, even you saying that makes me still feel a little bit uneasy in some ways, because it's the truth, you know, I love the life I have 100%, and I feel very grateful to be able to live where I live, but I'm not being fulfilled in a way that I used to be fulfilled. And that is, I've realized, a very large part of what makes me happy is this having this project kind of passion thing that I'm interested in. And all the other things are just like little sweeteners that just sort of like delay the inevitable. You need to sort of like really work on that. Oh, so you get a little notice. Well, we've been upgraded on the call. That's good.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Yes, that's a win.
Okay, so we've actually touched on a few of these barriers, but Carrie, why don't you start and tell us like one of the barriers of why we are not reaching our happiness?
So remember, we're going to try and touch on the 10 ways. There's plenty other ways, but we're going to touch quickly on these 10 ways. One of them being we're not chasing our own version of happiness, which is exactly what we've been talking about. It's the same scenario, Daniel, where you're saying like you went to college because that's what's expected of you. You want this big house because that equals success. You want this fast car because that's what we do whenever we hit success. Mm-hmm. But it's like everybody has a different version of what happiness is. And it's like what we're learning is that, you know, what means happy to me does not necessarily mean happy to you. Mm-hmm. And it's actually kind of difficult for me now that I'm in a space of more, I am starting to figure that out. You know, I'm almost 40, I'm almost figuring out kind of thing. But it's like I see people that are behind me in this journey and I think, oh, it's hard not to look back and want to like help. Like, listen, you know, like I feel like you're taking this path that's just more of a robotic routine path. Mm-hmm. When thinking about these other aspects of your happiness and what is it really coming from. So it's like chase your own version. It doesn't mean the same for everybody, and be okay with what that means for you personally, not everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting what you mentioned about, it's almost like all these roads of how you could be successful tend to lead to just these few things that we do that's supposed to illustrate to others that we are. So the big house, the car, whatever it may be, travel, etc.
They're all items that are tangible, essentially. I mean, obviously there's experience with travel, and I love the shit out of travel, so I'm not talking any shit on travel people. Sure. But it's like those are all items. You know, like if you strip that away, how do you feel at the end of the day? And it's like, to me, you know, there are more important aspects of me not having to have the 8 to 5. That's more important to me than having a fast sports car. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's looking at what that means for me to be happy and finding out how do I attain that goal by following a journey that makes sense and is organic to myself.
The thing is, though, is that to understand yourself in that way, you have to be mindful and you have to be present. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with being present because if you're present for the good stuff, you have to be present for the bad stuff. And a lot of times people are running away from the bad stuff and they're not about to sit with it. And they're not about to, you know, get in and roll around in it. So being present is a big thing, but you have to be okay with the sugar and the shit, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's being present is a scary state to be in sometimes, you know. That's the case, and I'm constantly working on that. I mean, it's interesting. I think, you know, we used to, certainly at the startups, you know, they would give you all of these tools to kind of essentially, and I don't think it wasn't a pitch, but it was sort of like, oh, we'll give you massages, we'll have a mindful coach to come in, we'll be like self-aware, but really it's all about you just keep working. I mean, it's not really anything else.
Exactly. Well, and the biggest thing is,
thunder. Yeah.
We never get thunder in Southern California.
No, there's this wet water dropping from the sky.
There is. I had to shut the door because it's so loud.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what I was going to say. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Because the thing is, too, is it's like, okay, you're present, you're mindful, but the source of happiness that we're always trying to achieve, we're always trying to attain, what we start, and you've started understanding, I've started understanding, Carrie started understanding, is that stuff is for us. If we're not happy, that's some shit inside of us that we need to look at and we need to change.
So another reason is that we don't feel that our happiness is important. It's like, I don't have time for this. I don't know the worth of the value of me putting time into doing this. I don't know if I should do that kind of a deal. It's like, I'm comfortable where I'm at. Nothing hurts, you know, like
and also in our society, we consider happiness a luxury, which is the craziest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. Because if there's anything you want to be in life, it's happy, right? It's not a luxury. Like, that is the only way to make it through. How many years? 85 fucking years that we have to be on this earth?
Well, there's an association.
Be a luxury.
There's also the association with, like, happiness is average. Like, if you're fine where you're at, you should be happy. Just be happy with where you're at. Like, you're not on the high flux of this roller coaster, and the bottom, just be happy in this average.
Yeah.
But the more mindful and aware that you become, you understand that you have that ability to control that, you know, behavior to get yourself to the actual happiness level of a bliss where it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing around you, it equals happiness to you.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things in that, isn't there? I think, you know, like certainly growing up in England and then growing up in Australia, very early in England and in Australia, there's nothing at school or high school I recall that would be anything to do with your happiness or getting taught to be aware or having skills.
So not trained in life.
It's like completely the opposite.
Yeah, we are not set up to succeed in that way. We're not set up in mental health. We're not set up in problem solving. We're not set up in resiliency. We're not set up in achieving a balanced life. Like, school is crazy to me because and then on top of it, sorry, my cat just walked. Get off.
That's like the scariest, like, anaconda just went.
I'm just wondering where my cat is, but I think she's fast asleep.
What's your cat's name?
Oh, she's a foster cat. Her name is Oksana.
It's Oksana?
Oksana, yeah. She's had a Russian family before.
The gymnast?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's funny.
The funny thing is, I call her a nickname is Oxy, and then someone said to me the other day, "You named your cat after a drug?" I was like, oh,
you're like, no.
Wow.
Okay, so then one of the other things, and we've already kind of touched on this, is we're really another barrier to happiness is we're really afraid of reaching the end of the road because what the fuck is left afterwards? Like, as humans, we are made to evolve. We're made to evolve emotionally. We're made to evolve spiritually, mentally. We are in a constant evolution. So when that evolution stops, panic sets in. So instead of even sort of starting that journey where you know there could be an end, you just never start it, and then you don't have to end it.
Yeah. I mean, the analogy I love is that idea that, you know, you have a racetrack around, it goes around in a circle, and you're just taught to go around in circles, and all of a sudden one day that racetrack has got like a corner the other direction. You don't know what to do. You know?
Yeah, exactly. There's just
go around in circles. Yeah, and I get it. I certainly don't have the answer, but I think back to the being aware that is the situation, and when I think about my own happiness, and when I've really been truly have moments of memory that has been pure happiness, it has nothing to do with any of the things that I've been through relatively recently. It's actually, you know, some of the most happiest moments were living in London when I was early 20s, zero money to my name, really just enjoying every moment. And that's the key, actually. It was enjoying the moments at the time they were happening, rather than wishing for something in the future or regretting something that happened in the past.
Right. And that's something else that we'll talk about later, is the end game. Like, you want to have an end game, and if you don't, then you won't pursue it.
Well, as we know on our list of 10 things, that is one of the things. It's like we fear the outcome of what happens, right? Mm-hmm. So I recently went through a big change, and it was like, on paperwork, it made no sense. You know, like, you got the pros and the cons, and the pros were all security reasons, you know, money reasons.
But tell what your change is.
Well, I'm just saying, like, so I had all of these things on this list of, this is corporate life where everything is safe and I know what the outcome is. And this is happiness, which is not corporate life. It's leaving that area and going to uncharted waters, essentially, because it was like, I loved my job. I loved everybody I worked with. Like, you know, like, if you read like books, they're like, oh, they hated their jobs, they left and found a different, like, no, literally I had to go into my resignation meeting of like, it's not you, it's me. Like, I love y'all. And I still want to be BFS with y'all, but I can't work here anymore because it doesn't align with the balance that I need in my life. Yeah. But it was like, I was afraid of that outcome. And I was afraid of, like, primarily for me, security meant financial reasons. It's like, in this day and age, if you have a good paying job, who walks away from that? Yeah. That doesn't make sense, you know? So I was fearing with the outcome of, like, the what if. So that delayed my reaction for like a year.
It delayed it for so long. I was like, bitch, you're not happy. Leave the job. Like, for me, it was a no-brainer. But so you're subtle about it, he's more lit, because I really don't have those hangups. I am afforded the luxury of doing what I want because my husband has a good paying job that allows me to do that. So in my head, I see her being completely unbalanced, throwing her family off balance, all of these things. And she's a logical thinker and I'm an emotional thinker. And so I see it and she's like, yeah, I know, I feel it, but logically it doesn't make sense. So it was a long ass process for her. Like, how long did that take?
Well,
7 or 8 months?
No, because I remember that my husband said to me that he was like, oh, I got a raise on a day. And he's like, oh, shoot, this was one of the days you were going to turn in your resignation. And that was in like December. And I finally turned in my resignation in March of the following year. And they somehow had this plan and wrangled me back in where I worked from home part-time. My final day was not till 4 months ago. Like, it was a 1.5 year progress. But it was like fear of that outcome, because if I look at my spreadsheet and the lack of gray area, here's all the reasons why this job is great. Here's why they're not great. And this area over here is great. Like, there wasn't anything I could write down. Like, like Susan's mean to me at the coffee machine, or, I don't make good money, or whatever it is. I didn't have that on that side of the list. So It was like, I'm afraid of the outcome because there's no logical sense to me in this routine or pattern or journey.
Right. You couldn't be like, intuitively, I just know that I shouldn't work here. You're like, I need concrete reasons. I need a pros and cons list. And I hate pros and cons lists because it's all fucking logical, and nothing is really truly logical in life. You know what I mean? So when people do pros and cons lists, I'm just like, you're fucking yourself already. Like, that is all logic. And you also can't use emotion, because that'll fuck you too. Yeah. Like, your heart says one thing, your brain says another thing. And that's when I figured out I have to go with my gut on everything, because that's the only thing that won't lie to me. That's the only thing that won't pull the wool over my eyes.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? When you look at those lists, because you could say the reverse. If you think about some of the happiest nations and the happiest populations in the world, on paper, they would have, in the Western world, nothing really. I mean,
you know what's so crazy? It's like every story you hear when people from, like an autobiography, or where they're just speaking in terms of their life, they're like, the happiest times, their statement's always the same. I didn't have any money, or I was homeless, like it's some dire situation, but there was never like, I was a zillionaire and I was scot-free, I had nothing going on. I could do whatever I wanted.
That's exactly right. I remember, I think it was a famous actor many years ago. I was reading that he was criticized for commenting on about money doesn't make you happy, and by the journalist. And the journalist was like, well, yeah, it's easy to say when you've got a lot of money. And he's like, well, no, I'm the only person that can say. People that have money get the only
right. I'm the one that has all the information to be able to say that. You don't have money. You don't fucking know.
That's right. It's interesting. Exactly. But no, look, I think, I used to do a lot of work in India, actually, through one of the startups. We had a team over there, and I was in India a lot. And, we're in Mumbai, and we did the tour like all the Westerners do around the slums in Mumbai. And then you start to realize that, obviously, visually it's pretty shocking, in the sense of it appears to be dirty, although it's very organized. But you realize that they're some of the happiest people in the world, living in this life that is what we would say on paper is like terrible.
Right, exactly. And that's, unfortunately, on paper is what we all are trained to go by.
Yeah, but that gut feel is like this combination of emotion and rationality. That's sort of like, that's how I view the gut feel, I guess. And I've been going through that recently. I've been going through like, okay, I have this feeling around this idea, but it doesn't make, it's risky from a financial sense. Emotionally, I'm kind of like maybe too in depth into it in some way. So I feel I might make, but then you start to overanalyze it, which is like, again, not the possible right approach.
Right. Because you can just overthink it. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can talk yourself into and out of. And that's why I just don't use my brain. I stopped using my brain, and it was the best thing I've ever done.
Well, I've started to do everything these days. That's one thing I definitely has changed with that thing. I just say yes to everything, and if I don't like it, then I won't do it again. And
right, because you don't want to insta-know things. You don't want to be the insta-knower and not open yourself up to experiences, because a lot of time those experiences lead to some other things.
Yeah, I mean, complete transparency. The way that we met, Stacey, I almost cancelled on that. I almost was like the day before. I was like I was a bit overwhelmed with the family, and I was like, is this what I really want to do?
Right, something else to add to your list.
Yeah, that's right. Like it's like all this stuff.
Meet some crazy lady on the beach or something.
Yeah, exactly. But then that within literally the first 30 seconds, I'm like, yeah, I know I've made the right decision, and then we're now talking. So.
Oh, I'm so glad that you enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, it was I mean, it's the thing. It definitely enjoyed it, obviously, and then my mind was playing this balance between rationality, time, family, etc. But something was telling me I needed to do it, and that something was my gut. And my gut led me there, obviously.
Which is not on the spreadsheet. So it's like the farther we can get our minds away from that spreadsheet, that gut is not in those columns anywhere. So we need to ignore all columns and go towards gut, because you said.
And I think in the entrepreneurial world, my experience within the entrepreneurial world, there is definitely successful businesses that are driven purely by spreadsheets, but but successful businesses are not happiness. Yeah. So
right. Success and happiness are two different things.
You kill yourself doing it, and maybe you'll make a buck. I get that, but.
Well, it goes back to what your version of happiness is. If that's your version of happiness, is having that success and being able to attain all these tangible items, then that may be that, but that's not your path. We're aware of that, and we know which way to actually, help grow the path that we're on that makes sense for us.
But here's the question, though, maybe I'm opinionated about this. I feel that for people that feel that successful and having a big bank account and buying all the fancy stuff is happiness, is that they just haven't evolved. That's how
right. I agree. I
feel like an arsehole saying that.
No, but I 100% agree with you. And that's where I have to sort of have a tolerance for people like that. And I have to tell myself they have not evolved, and I have to be okay with their path that they're on and their evolution and not try and judge it and all of that. So I totally agree with that. Okay.
I was going to say, like the same thing, like literally where I was saying, like everybody's in a different part of their journey. I have to remind myself that just because I have found where it's right for me to be, I can't, pass judgment on them because they're not there yet. Because it all comes at everybody's due time. So it's like, be thankful where we're at and hope and silently think to yourself, help this person follow the path they need to be for a more calm, happy daily life.
Yeah.
Right.
Because for me, it was later in life, like when I was in my 20s and 30s, I probably
I'm 39. I'm fixing to hit it. I'm fixing to hit 40. I'm just now. I mean, I wouldn't say I've figured anything out, but I'd say I'm on the right path, right?
I loved, Daniel, when we met with your session, that you were like, I don't trust anybody that hasn't been a drunk. I'm like, I am with you. I don't trust anyone that hasn't done that path.
But that's an interesting. Have you read the book Flow? I can't remember it's a really famous book. It talks about essentially how artists get into that kind of moment of creativity and then they produce their greatest work.
Yeah.
It's hard to ignore the relationship between angst and unhappiness with those artists, because all the great artists were, manic depressive, whatever it may be.
Cutting ears off.
Yeah, that's right. There's so many stories around it, and with actors as well, because I love cooking, Anthony Bourdain, his story really hurt my heart, because he had, again, on paper, on whatever we saw, all the money in the world, had an amazing job traveling around the world.
Traveling everywhere. Like what could like you said, like on the paper, it looked like the ideal, I want this. This is what that's what I'm trying to get to.
Completely, great published author, but suffered with drugs and alcohol and depression all of his life, and eventually it beat him,
I feel like a lot of people who have this sort of brain that's not like a linear brain, I feel like that sort of comes with the territory, because there is a lot of angst in being a self-propelled person, and there is a lot of angst in creativity. And I think a lot of we all know that the greatest works of art have come from angst. The greatest writings, the greatest art pieces, the greatest music. Yeah. Everything comes from that angst, because what can you talk about if you have not experienced that?
Yeah, and this is this cope. We spoke about sort of coping with being an empath, and then when we first met Stacey, and then I think it's not, for me, it's not resisting that. It's just being able to cope with the highs and lows, because I think I do produce on some level of creativity my best work when I go through those troughs and peaks.
Yeah, for sure.
For me, the idea of being this linear line, and that just freaks me out of boredom. I cannot do that in my life.
Right. It's straight up panic if I think about that.
That's right. But there's no doubt that the people around me, as well as for myself, that the peaks and troughs are something that can be pretty unsettling, and it's something that I'm working on, trying to kind of like smooth those out a little bit.
Right. And the thing is, like with mindfulness, that's the thing. Like, this is the way life goes. And with mindfulness and you sort of have to just ride the ride. You can't attach yourself to the highs. You can't attach yourself to the lows. You just have to ride it.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so we've already found 5 ways that we sabotage our happiness. Who knew it was so easy? But when we come back, we'll actually discover more ways we can screw ourselves. But first, a message from our sponsor, BrainGangsterBeats.com. This podcast is brought to you by Brain Gangster Beats Audio Brainwave Entrainment Series. Brain Gangster Beats is a natural and super cool way to tweak your brain. Just listening to Brain Gangster Beats using headphones or earbuds can actually change your brainwave activity, which we all know is directly connected to your state of mind. Using different frequencies in the audio files, we can achieve whatever mental state you're looking for at that moment. Relaxed, focused, energetic, fearless, you name it. Visit braingangsterbeats.com to check out the entire series, downloadable by single or album. Okay, so it's not hard to see after our conversation why there are so many barriers to happiness. And I think the key is just being mindful enough to recognize the barrier. Like all these barriers that are mental, we have to recognize the barrier so we can kind of work through it, right? Mm-hmm. So number 6 on our list of ways to sabotage our happiness is we don't feel like we deserve it. And we talked about this. Mm-hmm. And whether it's an obligation to put others first, which I think a lot of times, and Daniel as an empath, we're very sensitive. We feel what other people are feeling and we want to take care of that, and we will put that before our own happiness. Feelings of guilt from things we've done in the past, low self-worth. There's a lot of reasons that we don't feel like we deserve happiness. So, and it's easy to believe that people that reach happiness are like blessed or whatever, but I think the most of the time when people really find their true happiness is they have to consciously remind themselves over and over and over that they deserve it. Because we all do deserve happiness. No matter what we've been through, no matter the shitty things we've done in our life, we all deserve to be happy, right? So sort of
I think we have to like remind ourselves.
Huh?
Like I think we have to remind ourselves from an acceptance where it's like we were all saying like we feel guilty, whether that guilty is I have all these things that, you know, by dictionary definition state happiness. So we feel guilty that we're there and we don't feel that bliss yet, but it's like we have to be aware of that guilt and essentially talk ourselves away from that. Like, no, what I'm doing is right for me and this is okay. It's okay for me to feel good and it's okay for me to follow this path and it's okay for me not to fit in with everybody else because this is what's making me happy at this time in my journey.
Right. You have to consistently remind yourself why you're worthy of being happy. That is something that we all have to do, because if we're going by society, if we're going by what we taught, it's just like we said, happiness is a luxury. And so if we have happiness, we have to understand that we deserve it. And we all fucking deserve it. Like, we're all humans. We've all been through shit. We all deserve happiness. That's why we're here, is to sort of find that happiness. So constantly reminding yourself that you're worthy of where you are is so important.
So, and go ahead, Daniel.
No, I was just going to say, this is probably, I mean, I don't have the list to see what the next 4 items are, but
you're in for a treat, man.
This is the one that I struggle with the most, I think. I certainly, I do make a conscious decision to tell myself every morning that the current state of play of where I'm at and the path that I'm taking at the moment, that I do deserve that, and that I shouldn't be guilty of that. But it's it is honestly a daily battle, 100%. But the thing is that it's balanced out. I'm far more aware now. So like I feel it far more than I used to as well. I much prefer to be in this state rather than doing the robotic and ignoring it. But in the same sense, it brings up all these other questions around, well, why do you feel guilty? You know, and then
why are you the lucky one that gets to
do that? That's right. And you know, and sometimes it's like trusted friends that will remind me that of all the things that we're talking about, that everybody deserves happiness. It's actually got nothing to do with success. Everyone deserves happiness.
Right. Exactly.
And I think for me, that's when I sort of consciously went through that understanding, that disconnect, and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, being successful commercially is completely irrelevant, really, to whether I'm happy or not. And that makes it easier for me to kind of not feel guilty about stuff because I deserve it. You know, I mean, recently my most happiest moments have been actually just before I met Stacey. Stacey, I was down at the San Clemente. I paddled out and went for a surf for the first time in literally 10 years or something. I think it was. It was nuts.
I did not know it had been that long since you'd surfed, because I knew you were excited about surfing. Yeah.
So I used to surf a lot, and then I paddled out, and I was terrible. Didn't matter in the slightest. I surfed Old Man's, which is a very famous surf break down there that is basically named Old Man because it's like a very mellow surfable wave. And I basically I didn't surf very well or anything, but I got out of the water and that was those little moments of bliss, you know. I was like, wow, that was pretty insane, you know. And that led to me booking a trip to Nicaragua, you know, like it was just one of those things. But I was reminded that my happiness and everything else is completely outside of that because, you know, that was that was free essentially, other than parking.
Exactly. It's, you know how we were talking about that flow, and that's what surfing is. Surfing is basically movement and meditation, right?
Yeah.
When you're in flow, there's no what is going to happen ahead of me. There's no what did I do behind me. Flow is literally being in the present, in the moment. Yeah. And there is nothing there except for you and what you're doing. And it's the most freeing feeling that you can imagine. And that's the great thing about our brains is that when we're working on something that we're passionate about or something that means something to us and we get into flow, time stops, right?
Yeah.
That to me, being in flow is pure happiness. Just like you, surfing, I did do surfing. I surfed. I got up on I did break 3 toes the first time I tried to surf.
Okay.
Jumping up there like a dumbass, but the water was so cold, the Pacific. That's cool. The water was so cold that I didn't feel it. But anyway, it's just like, I wasn't afraid of sharks, which I thought I would be. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, you are so synced up with the universe and yourself, and everything is just moving in a perfect motion. It's the most beautiful thing. And I really think flow is the meaning of happiness. I do.
Yeah, and I find that, I mean, I can find it in unusual places sometimes. Like although maybe not unusual, like motorcycles are another real passion of mine. And there are moments that you ride a motorcycle through up to Angeles Crest, up to Newcombs or something here in LA, that you're only thinking of that very moment. You're not thinking about anything else. You don't have time as well because your brain's very consumed. It's exhausting at times.
Right, because you're so hyper focused on what you're doing, and it does, yeah.
You know, and
I feel like somebody's Tostino pizza rolls are done, first of all.
That's my daughter's quesadilla.
You know what I was going to say, Daniel, though? It's like, so motorcycles for you, so we have a Jeep, and it's like when the top is off, you know, I'm in Kansas. There's nothing, sorry, Kansas, but it's not like the sights I'm seeing on these roads are fantastic, but it's literally, I'm present, and I've got the sun on me, and that is like, I can be driving to yoga or to the grocery store, but I am literally the most happiest person ever because I have exactly what I need at that moment in time. And I am fully present.
What is the only thing I want to do when I come visit you in Kansas?
Dirt roads. So,
I want to drive on dirt roads. Like, that is my only goal. That's all I care about because I want to get on those dirt roads. I want to feel that space. Yeah. That is literally the happiest thing I can do when I go home to visit her and I'm like, this is me at my happiest. I'm driving on a fucking dirt road, but I love it.
Yeah. You're choking on dust. Okay. There's nothing tropical about this. There's nothing luxurious about this, but there is an awareness and a present aspect to this that you're happy and you feel that bliss. And like, I don't get goosebumps, and I think Stacey fakes goosebumps.
She always
like, I'm so excited I have goosebumps.
I think we're all talking about similar things. Last year, that 2017 year, I did a 4-week trip through the Sahara Desert, Morocco on motorcycles.
What the hell, Daniel?
We're in Jeeps and dirt roads in Kansas. Come on.
But the reality is, there were some beautiful sights at times, but the vast majority of the time, it is like 120 degrees. Right. So hot. You're picking up your motorcycle for at least 6 or 7 times during the day. You're camping in the most rudimentary thing. You're not eating fancy food. You're
thirsty as hell.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You have dust in your teeth.
That's right. You're not having. We didn't shower for like a week. It was just. It was definitely not luxurious in any way. But there were moments that were just pure just pure, actually. That's what we want.
Yes, pure. Don't you feel, and I feel like nature is one of the best ways to be pure and just sort of syncing with our environment, whether it's the Sahara Desert or the beach or a dirt
road in Kansas.
Yeah, a dirt road in Kansas. Yeah,
I don't even care. I so appreciate the dirt roads in Kansas because
there's a silence and a peace in all of these areas, and it's not about the motorcycle in the Sahara or the convertible on A1A or whatever what's it called in LA?
Florida, yo.
I know, that's why I know, but what's 95? What?
The 405?
Oh, PCH.
PCH.
Oh yeah, the 405 is beautiful.
But it's not the sound of the ocean, but it's just that feeling that you have right there, which that feeling can be replicated anywhere.
Yeah.
You in that moment. So it's not about the ocean. It's not about the Sahara. It's not about the dirt roads in Kansas. It's a moment in time where you're present and you're literally like goosebumping it. You know?
Yeah.
Like that should be a rap right there. I'm goosebumping it.
Goosebumping it.
We get some beats now.
All right, what's number 7?
So the other thing is that we lack confidence because, again, if we're thinking about society as a whole, they follow these routines. You go to kindergarten or you go to pre-K, kindergarten, elementary school, high school, college, master's. It's all a progression where it's step by step by step. And if you want to bounce off that train, do you have the confidence to say, I'm worthy of that and I'm going to go against the flow of traffic that says I'm supposed to be over here? There's a huge confidence to be able to say, no, I'm good enough, or I'm where I'm at in life that I can jump off and do what's right for me. And I'm scared, but I'm going to be brave and I'm going to do it. And it's going to take my BFF a year to talk me off of this train. You know what I mean? Like it's hard, but we lack confidence to jump to that side because that's a scary unknown. And for like people like me where we're black and white numbers, that's a very, very unknown gray area. So it's like, how do we gain that confidence to know that follow your gut, know what's right for you, know that we don't follow everybody else's path, and take that because I think it's on female.
Sorry, I'm back again. You guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I mean, I agree. I think for me though, I have to say that I did that early on because I wasn't so much stepping off the train. I was kind of kicked off the train because I wasn't, performing in the corporate world.
Even better though, because you didn't have.
Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Like, yay that somebody did that for you because mine was agonizing. It's like stepping a foot off of a bungee jumping for like 7 years.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm not gonna do it yet. So it's like, thank God you just got pushed off the train. They're like, get out of here.
Exactly.
It wasn't just agony for you, Carrie.
Oh, it was agony for you. It was agony for my husband, my children. They're like, oh my God, just jump already.
It hurt because I'm a jumper. So I have to have patience with Carrie, who is a very logical thinker and who's not a jumper. So for me, it was so fucking painful because I did understand because I know her so well. But on the other hand, I was like, it's a difference between being happy and not being happy. Like, what's so hard?
What's so hard? Get off the train now. And I'm like, but wait, what about this 401 or this special, whatever. That was always, for me, it was always money related because I associate security with the bank account. So
which leads us to the next item, which is we're focused on the end goal instead of the process, right? And Daniel, that's the same with you. It's like we reach this peak. That's the end goal, right? But and that's kind of what we talked about too on your next journey, on your next adventure. We'll call it an adventure. Mm-hmm. It's like you're struggling with sort of just accepting where you are and not having to look forward, right? And the process is such a beautiful part of it. I mean, the process is all of it. Just like they say, it's the journey, not the destination.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and not dissimilar to everyone's version of happiness, everyone's version of success is different, certainly in financial terms. I just, I just feel like I'm on this sort of holding pattern, you know, and I have been for this is the second year of the holding pattern.
That's a sucky feeling, by the way. I hate the holding pattern.
Yeah.
It's like a merry-go-round that somebody else is already puking on the ride and you can't get off because they're not slowing down.
Well, but the thing is though, like, but the holding pattern for me is actually pretty comfortable in the sense of like, I don't have like a lot of like pressures or anything, but that's the frustrating thing about it. It's like, you know, it's almost like I need to land somewhere where I know I'm going to be fulfilled and have this next adventure, but I don't know where to land.
I think the holding pattern is so hard. I love that you were able to enjoy the non-pressure part. The holding pattern is so hard just because it's like you're not grounded. And so there's nothing grounding you. There's nothing structuring you. Yeah. You're just willy-nilly, and that is not a comfortable feeling. We love the idea of freedom and having that ability to do what we want to do. But at the same time, there needs to be some structure that we float in that box. You know what I mean?
Completely, yeah. I mean, and I've recognized that it's certainly, I mean, I've been making conscious decisions to be more in LA than I am away from LA, just to have a base and a grounding place. Now, I mean, I was talking to a buddy of mine in Australia about, you know, LA and being this grounding place. And he's like, he's never been here, but he's saying, surely LA is like not grounded at all. And I'm like, well, I mean, there's elements of that, obviously, but I found it to be very, very grounding. There's some amazing people here that are doing some amazing stuff. And I've really found my home, I guess. But it took me a long time to get there, you know. Like, I was really uncomfortable with the unknown and the holding pattern for quite a while. I wasn't that comfortable in it, but at least I didn't have some of the pressures that I had before. But it's frustrating. There's no doubt about it. And again, though, this was related to the guilt, because I feel a little bit guilty saying that. I feel a little bit guilty saying that it's frustrating being in this holding pattern.
Right.
Right, but the like where you're saying like you were at least comfortable in the holding pattern. I know from my personal experience, holding pattern was terrible. Like, you're just like in a cage, like a fighting cage, and you're just like, I'm like shielding from, like, no, don't hit me. Like, it's just like, it's.
You're right.
That was not the holding pattern was terrible for me. So it was like I needed to understand what was best, because as we see on step 9. Or one of the 9 ways that we sabotage is because taking the steps necessary to get to happiness are super overwhelming, because it's like, okay, so for me personally, I'm going to walk away from this job. Okay, again, back to my spreadsheet. What does that mean financially? What do I need to do to carry on the same life? Because I'm cutting out all this income, you know? And it's like, what does that mean? And how do, I'm sorry, what?
Did you really have a spreadsheet?
No.
She would, though. She would.
I know. Well, there's definitely people that would. I was like, I'm glad.
You know what? Okay, so let me say this. So there are 3 people in this world: non-spreadsheeters, spreadsheet thinkers, and spreadsheeters, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a spreadsheeter. Like, I didn't legit have like a Quicken or something like, okay, like, oh, that guy off of Along Comes Polly. You know what I'm talking about, that movie? Along Comes Polly?
Oh, yeah.
I don't have like that, because that was like the risk meter, right? Like, if I quit my job, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
So I'm in the middle somewhere. Like, I've got the list in my mind, because literally I'm thinking of it. It all comes down to, you know, like a financial aspect. Like, you see all these things, you know, listed off of why this job works out. And if there's nothing negative as far as an environment there, what do you have to say that this is a bad place for me to be? So it's like taking that step was super overwhelming for me to be like, you know what, this isn't right for me. And for me to explain myself to everybody that, you know, like, I've got family that are like, what do you mean you're walking away from this great job? I've got coworkers that are like, what do you mean you're, you know, like, it didn't make any sense. My husband was always super supportive, do what you want to do. So with my kids, but it was like outside of my little bubble. And Stacey was like, that doesn't fit the norm.
Yeah.
So for me to get to that step was super overwhelming, to be able to say, like, okay, I'm going to take charge. I'm going to be confident, and I'm going to take these steps because I need this, not what y'all want for me.
And you did it, which is awesome.
And I did it, and I love it. And I was like, you know, speaking of happiness, it was like this morning. So I went to a really early morning hot yoga so that I could be back in time to get ready for this. And I was like, I felt really content in that I had the morning to prepare and think and be mindful and be aware of where I was going with my next steps. There was no robotic moves. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was like, it was all in my time frame. And I could feel guilty for saying that because there's people that are working 8 to 5 and they're like, I wish I could just sit around and not do anything, you know, and have a triple beer at noon or whatever. But it's like, I took myself down this path, and everybody can, you just have to be brave enough to do it.
And I think that's the key, isn't it? Because everybody largely can in their own version of doing that. And you know, so you touched on something before that I really resonated. I think there's people that, like, I'm a jumper, yeah. I'm much more comfortable with jumping and then realizing where I landed wasn't where I wanted to be, rather than not jumping. Not jumping to me is the most frustrating thing of all. I just can't do it. I will just jump. Now, clearly there's consequences for just jumping as well. But I think from a young age, I was taught to jump rather than think about it too much. And that's weird because I'm a Libran, and Librans are like usually indecisive in some ways.
Oh my God, I know Libra so well.
Yeah, so like
crap.
It's slightly different to the norm possibly, but I think sorry, I was going that. I think the being aware of that and that situation and then doing it is available to everybody. It's just work, isn't it? I mean, it's just working on being able to do that.
God, it's so much work. And for somebody who's as literal as I am, it's daily. And for me personally, I was like grasping for signs that would say, no, you're fucking stupid. Don't do this. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh, wait, the light was green. I'm not supposed to do this. You know, like, because again, if you're very literal like I am, this doesn't follow any sort of a rule book.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I've got I've got one sibling, a younger brother. Beautiful guy, love him dearly. Him and I could not be more different. It's strange to me that we have same parents, same growing up, same upbringing, yet we are completely the opposite end of the scale. And for him to, even because he was here recently with his family visiting, and like the idea of moving to a different country and starting a life is like, I might as well be saying I'm going to the moon. Like it would be, it's something that is just so far-fetched in his mind, because he'll give you 1,000 reasons why.
So he's like, Stacey, he's like, his brother is like Christy, and then there's me. So I have a sibling that's like, what do you mean you're going to, like, why wouldn't you work?
Yeah.
Your kids are in school. There's nothing that lines up. You know what I mean? Like, my husband can provide for us. So, I mean, I don't have to work, but it's like, she couldn't figure that out. Like, I don't understand. There's no reason for you to walk away from this job.
She so can't figure that out that her sibling literally hates my guts because I am the opposite of how she thinks. Like, she truly despises me, which just gives Carrie and I the biggest giggles ever.
It's like Stacey, like my sister, love her to death, nothing against her, but she is such in a cookie cutter of what we're supposed to be. And that's, I mean, I would say majority of the people in the world are in that cookie cutter. They don't know how to escape that cookie cutter. And so thank God I figured out how to get the hell out of that cookie cutter, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, she's in that cookie cutter, and seeing somebody who is so free spirit and you're doing what you want to do and you're not making 8 figures. What do you mean? You know, like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I want to continually, like, you know, like, get a nicer house, a nicer car, blah, blah, blah. And we're all like, no, I'm cool. I just want, you know, I'd like to see parts of the world.
I just want to chill, yo. I just want to go do my shit. I don't care about my house. I don't care about my car, because that's not what makes me happy. I know that now. I thought that would make me happy because that's what everybody told me. But I'm at the point where my husband makes decent money that I can sort of go, you know what? I don't give a shit about that stuff. Like, that is really, truly not what makes me happy. Being on the beach, hanging out with people like Daniel is what makes me happy. Is it going to make me a shit ton of money? No. But does it make me feel fulfilled and like I'm doing something and like I'm connecting with people? Yes. And that's where my happiness comes from.
Yeah. I think being fulfilled is kind of, that's my, I don't know whether goal is the right word, but that is kind of like my path at the moment, you know, trying to work out what that is.
And, you know, it's so funny because fulfillment, especially, like I said, for brains like ours, it's not going to be there all the time. It's going to be bits.
And yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's going to be bits and pieces. And we have to be okay with that. We have to be okay with those little bits and pieces of fulfillment, because happiness is not something that just comes and stays with you forever. It's like, it comes and goes because life really happens, you know? And that leads us to number 10, which is having what we want makes us feel vulnerable because we can lose it. And so if we never achieve what we think will make us happy, then we never have to worry about losing it. And so that's why we don't go down that path. That's a barrier to our happiness, is the fear of gaining it and then losing it. And my whole thing is, you have to be okay with gaining it and losing it. It's not going to always be there. And you have to be okay with the ride. And you have to be okay with the ups and downs. And that's what I always try and tell my kids. It's like, I tell my kids, life is literally ups and downs. And the successful way to move through life is to be able to ride it and not attach yourself to the highs or the lows. And then you don't feel vulnerable because you don't have to worry about losing anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like at an amusement park. Would you rather ride the train through and get robbed for your silver and gold from the local train robbers? Or would you rather go through that awesome roller coaster with the, you know, like the 7-cent spin corkscrew and you're
right.
The freaking
dip at the beginning, like that's the shit right there. Those
maybe break your neck a little. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
You're scared for your life.
You're like, I love my children. I love my husband. I'm sorry, peace out, world. Or do you want to simply like pretend with your children and their Disneyland suckers that the robber's going to take your little rainbow sucker and you're sad?
Right.
I don't want to do that. I want to go to the roller coaster.
Yeah, it's interesting. You meet, I recently met someone that we were talking about surfing, and she was like, "Well, I really want to learn to surf, but I'm never going in the water." And I was like, "Why?" I was like, you know, the sharks, the pollution, the people, you know, I was like, wow, okay. I don't know really. And again, you know, it's about being not tolerant, but like understanding the people in different paths and different kind of levels of where they're
Yes, it really is like whenever you feel, because I am not an empath. I am so literal that I'm like,
the opposite.
Do you have a fever? Because if you don't, literally, you're not sick. Shut up.
She is the opposite of an empath. Like literally, that's when she and I butt heads. Well, we
learned this.
Figured it out though.
Yeah, you worked it out now.
I feel everything and she feels nothing.
Yeah.
I don't have a soul, but what I'm saying is it's like the people, like they just like hang on the train all day. You're dealing literally with this fake little train robber. That's what you're like the high that you feel going down that roller coaster.
That's real shit, man.
That you're not feeling anything on the train ride. You're maybe like faking with your kids and act like it's scary, but like I want to actually have feelings through this journey that we call life. It's like the up is scary as shit because the whole be like, oh God, we're gonna die. And then the down, you lose your stomach. Like, do you lose your stomach on a train ride? No. So it's like I want to feel the ups and downs versus the train ride, and I want other people to feel that, but I have to remind myself, like, I can't judge them if they think in their mind at this time that bigger house and that bigger car and that bigger paycheck is more important to them because that's where they're at. And I can't fault them because I was just there, 18 months ago, and we're all going to hit that at a different time in our life. And 39 does not mean that's the right answer, or 45. Everybody's going to evolve to that at some point. Does it mean that
maybe not this lifetime?
Not a lifetime.
That's it. That's exactly right.
But we have to remember that just because we're there, others may not be. And it's like, I feel okay in my mind thinking to myself, like, oh, I hope, help this person out, like sending them positive vibes quietly. I'm not going to say that out loud. Like, dude, you can't be asking for this new car because that's not my place. Like, that's not where they're at, and that's fine.
It's their journey. Like, you have to respect other people's journey. Right.
Yeah, and I think it gets a little bit. We might have touched on this, Stacey, when we first met, but it gets a little bit more complicated, I think, when it's family. Because I've sort of been with my brother. I've been sort of trying to focus on giving him reassurance that he's so brave to be in the situation he currently is, that it's it's more scary than actually leaving the situation he needs to leave. Right. Because he's like in this plateau of like the mundane, if you like.
Right.
He's your younger brother that's in the robotic scheme currently, right?
Robotic scheme, and it's a whole bunch.
What's the age difference between you two?
3 years.
Okay, so the sister that's like super concerned about me is 10 years. Kind of like there's a certain age gap where they're like, okay, I got to protect my little sibling here who's like lost her mind.
Yeah, no, we just, I mean, like I said, we had a great upbringing, and we're just very, very different people, and we have been from a very young age, I think. I've been sort of trying to get him to think about moving forward with evolving in some, and it's his path, it's not mine to lead, but he lacks the confidence of change. It's like he's not a jumper, he's the opposite of a jumper. He'll give you 1,000 reasons why not to jump.
Right.
So him and I are like BFFs.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're sort of in the middle. He's probably the other extreme possibly, but I've been trying to get him to sort of understand that staying in that uncomfortable situation is more brave than it is actually to jump.
It
takes so
much more effort.
Yeah, that's right.
It's that slow Band-Aid. But you know what's cool? It's like where we're able to, like everybody has their own quest. Perhaps this is where they're at now. Oh, we lost Daniel.
No, I just I flicked the video off when I lose you guys.
We lost you, Carrie.
Yeah.
Oh, you lost me?
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going with it, so.
I don't remember either, but we've totally gone over on time, and we could talk about this shit for like ever. But I think it's really cool because Daniel is at a place where we're all striving to be. And it's so comforting to me to understand that that's not really the end goal. You know what I mean? And so it's comforting to me to know that I can create my own happiness where I am right now, instead of waiting for that end game, waiting for that making it, waiting for that money to come. And so I love talking to him about this because it just makes me feel like I don't have to be somewhere right now. You know what I mean? I can be where I am, and I can be comfortable where I am. As long as I'm evolving and as long as I'm moving forward, I'm exactly where I need to be.
Well, and Stacey, I think it's also important to remember that, like, where we're talking about the path that you and I have taken, it's like we are thankful to be where we're at right now. And we want to enjoy where we're at as far as being able to have the freedom to have these conversations and to be aware and to be able to constantly educate ourselves on ways to leave that positive lifestyle. So it's like, so behind me, you see like a lamp and a computer screen. I'm not like some like zillionaire over here, right? But I like where I'm at. You know what I mean? Like
and that's all that fucking matters. And that's what we need to remember. Do we like where we're at? Are we happy where we're at? If not, what can we do to change it? What do we need to change internally to overcome those barriers that are all internal? It's all internal, guys. It's not somebody telling you something. It's not a job that's suppressing you. It's all eternal. We fucking choose to be happy. Just
and
like I told you, Carrie, we choose to be successful. We can be successful. It takes steps, but we can be successful. Happiness is the same way. It takes fucking work. It takes steps. It's hard. It's not easy, but happiness is achievable, and we should all be there, and we should all overcome that internal shit from old stuff, from our parents, from getting raised, from the stuff that significant others have told us, from the stuff that we tell ourselves. We can overcome all of that stuff to achieve this happiness. It's not money. It's not shit that we acquire. It's not having a significant other. It's none of that. It literally comes from deep inside of us.
Completely. And I've tried the other way. I have cars and motorcycles for sale if anyone would like to buy.
You have that Porsche for sale?
I have 2 Porsches for sale, actually, yes.
My Jeep is not for sale. I must keep that for the dirt roads and happiness.
Yes, the motorcycle is not for sale either. I've got that one. But,
you fuckers, I'm driving a Nissan Armada.
Not on a dirt road.
No, that's right. Exactly.
No, I'm on PCH.
You're on the 405.
I'm on the.
I have 135 in Kansas.
Yeah.
No traffic.
Like
it's 3 lanes. And
I didn't know the 405 is anything to brag about.
No, the 405 actually sucks ass.
It's the worst road ever. People warned me about the 405 when I moved to LA, and I never really got it. And then I watched an episode of the Californians on the Saturday Night Live? You know that show? I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't seen that.
So funny, but it's Kristen.
Are you talking about where they do like all the different routes to get to
yeah. It's so LA. It's funny.
That's real. That is real talk too. That's real talk.
Right.
Like you have to know 18 routes to get around traffic.
Right. And I'm still the person that goes west or goes east rather of the 405. Most people in Santa Monica never leave Santa Monica.
Right. I know. Right. Exactly.
But I'm the brave soul that goes east occasionally.
You have to get away from the coast, yo.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
So lives in Wichita, Kansas.
what?
I said I'm the brave soul lives in Kansas in this terrible weather.
That's true.
Yes,
You
yes.
are. You are. A brave
And I
soul.
feel like I am like the poster child for if I'm saying like y'all can choose happiness, and I just threw out a y'all, right? I'm in Midwest United States. I've got no ocean. I've got no sun. I've got no palm trees. And I'm telling you that you can achieve happiness because you can take steps. You can bust through boundaries. You can do your own thing, and you can get there. It doesn't require some special part of land. It doesn't require some checking account. I don't know why I always say checking account. Banking account.
I like checking account. That's old school.
I know. I'm fixing it at 40, but so if we can do it, you guys can do it.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, Daniel, thank you so much for being a guest. I'm so excited. I just knew that we would want to, when we were talking about doing this podcast and resisting happiness, I was just like, man, Daniel's so the vibe for this. So you're our first guest. I love it. We went way fucking over because we have so much more we could talk about. But thank you so much for being here. And you have been listening to the Brain Gangster Podcast, brought to you by braingangsterbeats.com, where you can train your brain with Brain Gangster Beats. So thank you guys so much. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Right, Carrie?
Yes, we will be back in 2 weeks. And again, thank you, Daniel. It was amazing. You're amazing. You do you, everybody.
Thank you very much, guys.
Do you.
Exactly. No, thank you very much. Very kind of you. I really enjoyed it. I could spend every morning doing this. It was great.
I know, even without coffee, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But not till 10 a.m.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. That's the beginning of the day, you realize.
Once Seinfeld is over on TBS, then we can meet. Just saying for a friend.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you very much. See you guys.
Can you see us? So hard.
It's fun time.